Hey, welcome back here on Coastal Daybreak here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, 7:16 in the morning. Our next guest, you have heard him. He's filled in for Rush. You've heard him on our show, or you've heard him here on the station before. We're going to welcome to our show with his new book called Upside Down, Mark Davis. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Hey, Ben, I am fine. Great to be with you on the Talk Station.
It's great to have you on here. The book Upside Down, How the Left Turned Right into Wrong, Truth into Lies, and Good into Bad. I'm old enough, Mark, to remember back in the early 70s, the group Firesign Theater. They were a great satirical group, comedy group. They had an album out called Everything You Know Is Wrong. We're there.
Absolutely right. And what a superb name drop of a group that I remember as well. And it's kind of a great point that you bring up, because when they titled that album, it was comedy. It was satire. Now, all of a sudden, don't we find ourselves at a time when most things that we used to take for granted are wrong, or at least we're told they are? Things about gender differences, things about the size of government, things about religious tolerance, things about keeping our country secure, saying things that would have made sense, back in the 70s, which were crazy times.
Yes.
Things that people said all the time across political lines now are suddenly up for debate.
And welcome to the land of HB2 here in North Carolina, where we had to have legislation to say what bathroom you go in.
I know, and listen, it's crazy. And your entire state has been in the talk show minds and hearts of everyone across the country. And to learn, and just to go with, I know it's the other end of the state, but to have the NBA pull the All-Star game from Charlotte because the good people of North Carolina took a traditional view on gender, that is just, it's outrageous. This kind of stuff would have never happened not so very long ago.
And it goes back, for us anyway, it goes back to Charlotte itself, passing an ordinance, but included language that then just throws our world upside down. Language like gender expression and gender identity.
Well, indeed, because it's an old quote that in any kind of war, that the first fight is over the language. And I mean war metaphorically, at least for the moment. And psychology and physiology all have meanings, and they are different. And gender and what you are born as is a fact of biology. Now, are there things that, in the gender issue, things that need to be addressed when someone has gender dysphoria, boys who think they are girls and vice versa? Absolutely, and those things should be dealt with lovingly and sympathetically and biblically.
Absolutely.
But doggone it, man, when we are told that you can actually change what you are by virtue of your mood, your outlook, that's when things get crazy.
Where do we go from here? I mean, it just seems like we have passed a slippery slope. In fact, some time ago, I remember going into schools and doing career days back when you could ask people what your parents did for a living. Now you can't even ask that because they may not have parents, and you're insulting or hurting their feelings, and so. I saw this, as you have, see this slope slipping away from us from some time ago now.
Well, we're in the era, Ben, of trigger warnings where, exactly what does your father do for a living?
Yeah.
It implies you have a father, and it implies he has a job. These things used to not be particularly controversial. And it's funny, so much of it does go right back to the family structure. Mm-hmm. Let's go from the 70s that you just invoked. Let's go back a little further into the 60s in the beginning of President Johnson's so-called Great Society. At the beginning of that, a number of minority kids growing up in a household without a mother and father was about 10%, and now it's very nearly 75%. So how have all those programs worked out? How has all that liberal leadership worked out for actual human beings? And yet now here we face an election. Here we come with Clinton and Trump, and Lord knows there's 147 issues to deal with there. But ultimately, it has to come down to, do you want more of the policies that have been destructive to the family, destructive to society, or do you want to keep going the same way we've been going?
And here we battle, and when we battle racism, conservatives have not always been out on the forefront, but I do remember that we have had some moments where we were, and we need to reclaim that and say that racism is not a conservative point of view.
Well, that's one of the things that was one of my favorite parts of writing Upside Down, is it's about 150 things that people say that are just wrong. And one of them is that conservatives are racist. We are the people who truly do not care what color you are. Anybody saying that conservatives don't like black people, ask a group of conservatives what they think about Clarence Thomas or Allen West. Are you kidding me? We truly are the people who do not care at all what color you are. The left cares what color you are so that they can use and exploit you.
Yes, and so much we just take the line from the movie, follow the money. We have watched the money travel up and down, both in the environmental circles, in the race card, in elections, and we follow that money, and we see where the hearts and minds are following.
Absolutely true. And so in compiling a whole lot of things that people say that are just wrong, that fossil fuels are bad, that Christians are intolerant, that coddling terror is a good idea, these are all things that seemed upside down to me, so it seemed like a good book title.
Oh, Mark Davis, again, we're talking to his book Upside Down, How the Left Turned Right into Wrong, Truth into Lies, and Good into Bad. When you say that, your press release actually that came to us in our email pitch was said some of the progressive precepts that Davis disembowels include that the science of climate change is settled, gender differences don't matter, Christians are intolerant, and Mark Davis is available.
Oh, no, that last one actually is true. The first three, totally untrue. The last one, perpetually true. And listen, I've gotten a lot of interesting pushback on some of those. Somebody said, yeah, Mark, you really want to talk about that climate change thing? Of course I do. Is the planet's temperature changing? Of course it is. It always has. It always will. But the notion that humanity is doing it is absolutely not a scientific fact. It is something that we can study forever. It's something we can examine. We should have good policies that take care of the earth for its own sake. Green technology that works is a wonderful thing, but force-feeding it in an economy-wrecking junk science way is just brutal. So it's a big book full of pushback.
Again, it's called, from Mark Davis, Upside Down, How the Left Turned Right into Wrong, Truth into Lies, and Good into Bad. And I imagine it's out and available now?
That is correct. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever you want to do, just do a little web search of Mark Davis Upside Down, and I hope everybody enjoys it.
Now, Mark, this isn't something that one election or even 10 maybe be able to turn around. As we pointed out, these things go back to at least to the Great Society. We can probably go back further. So, but where do we go from here?
Well, it's funny. Ben, you and I are radio guys. We talk to people about things, and, I wish we had the ability to wave our magic wands and change society. It is up ultimately to our leaders, and not just political leaders in our churches, leaders in our families, to take a look at some of these precepts and say, you know what, we're going to disagree about certain things. How big should government be? Which wars are worth fighting and which are not? And we'll always have those kind of debates. But we've got to get back on the same page about some basics of life, some basics of humanity, some basics of society. And so without calling people names or getting ugly with people, I just respectfully offer in Upside Down the opportunity to rediscover some of that common ground. First of all, I think it'll help Mr. Trump win if we can avoid some of his brush fires and focus on some of these unifying principles. But it ultimately is not going to start on radio, and it's not going to start with one election. You're correct. It'll start in families, in churches, in schools, and so all we can do is get out there and take advantage of this free speech that we have and try to make a difference.
Mark Davis joining us this morning here on Coastal Daybreak on the Talk Station. Thanks, Mark.
Ben, thank you. Appreciate it so much.
And this is Coastal Daybreak here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240.